My sister tried to steal my inheritance, thinking she beat me. I played along, letting her live large while I quietly gathered the dirt. When her lies fell apart, I ended up with everything she lost. My sister tried to steal my inheritance, so I let her live a fake rich life until it all came crashing down. Growing up, Ashley was the golden child, homecoming queen, straight-A student, Dad's obvious favorite. I was the family disappointment, the one who lacked ambition, according to our father. What they never understood was that I simply valued different things. While Ashley collected academic awards, I collected information. While she charmed everyone in the room, I observed everyone in the room. Our childhood home was a battleground of expectations. Dad's corner office displayed Ashley's trophies like treasures in a museum. My report cards, consistently above average but never exceptional, were met with tight-lipped nods and murmured comments about applying yourself. By the time I turned 12, I'd learned to disappear within my own home, becoming the family ghost who drifted between rooms unnoticed. Ethan's in his room reading again, Mom would say with that specific sigh reserved for disappointments too mundane to address directly. Then she'd return to polishing Ashley's latest debate team medal or helping her prepare for another pageant. Ashley wasn't cruel about her status, not directly. She simply accepted her superiority as natural law, the way taller people accept their height. When teachers mixed up our names, we were only 14 months apart. She'd correct them with practiced patience. I'm Ashley Miller. That's Ethan. My name always sounded smaller coming from her mouth. Dad built Sterling Holdings from nothing, turning a small construction company into a real estate empire worth millions. Blood, sweat, and ruthless decisions, he'd say proudly over dinner. He started with a single fixer-upper in Astoria, flipped it for a modest profit, then reinvested everything into a crumbling 4-unit apartment building. 15 years later, he owned 17 luxury developments across Midtown and was breaking ground on his first skyscraper. Mom died when we were teenagers, breast cancer that moved too quickly for treatments to matter. In those final months, I sometimes caught her watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Once, when the morphine loosened her usual restraint, she gripped my hand and whispered, "You see more than they think." Remember that. After she was gone, Dad struggled to raise 2 children who couldn't have been more different. He understood Ashley, who mirrored his cutthroat approach to life. He never knew what to do with me, his quiet son who preferred books to boardrooms. "You need to toughen up," he'd tell me after Ashley demolished my opinions at dinner. "The world eats soft men alive." Then he'd toast Ashley's latest achievement, never noticing how she'd glance at me with that mixture of pity and triumph. The summer I turned 18, Dad insisted I intern at Sterling Holdings. "Time to learn the family business," he declared, not bothering to ask if I was interested. I was assigned to the finance department, a windowless room where 3 overworked employees processed payments for Dad's empire. They barely acknowledged me, too busy keeping up with invoices and expense reports. But in that fluorescent-lit purgatory, I discovered something unexpected. I had a talent for patterns. Numbers spoke to me. Discrepancies glowed like neon signs. On my 3rd week, I noticed something odd, a series of payments to a vendor that didn't exist. When I brought it to the senior finance manager's attention, he blanched. "Where did you find this?" he asked, voice tight. "The vendor code doesn't match our system," I explained, "and the address is a mail drop." He snatched the papers from my hand. "I'll handle it. Don't mention this to anyone." 2 days later, the senior finance manager was gone. Dad called me into his office. "Apparently, you found something," he said, studying me with new interest. I nodded. Davies was skimming, nearly 50,000 over 2 years. I waited for praise that didn't come. "Next time, bring something like that directly to me. The chain of command exists for a reason." That was it. No acknowledgement that I'd saved him money, no recognition of my attention to detail, just a reminder that I'd failed to follow protocol. Later that day, Ashley cornered me in the break room. "Dad's actually impressed," she said, stirring artificial sweetener into her coffee. "Don't get used to it." That night, I made a decision. If Dad wouldn't see my value, I'd find it elsewhere. I declined his offer to continue at Sterling after the summer, claiming I wanted to find my own path. The disappointment in his eyes was familiar territory. I enrolled at Columbia University, majoring in economics with a minor in computer science. Dad paid the tuition without complaint but never asked about my classes. Ashley, meanwhile, attended Stanford and made the dean's list every semester. Her summer internships at prestigious firms earned mentions in business journals. Dad framed the articles in his office. During my junior year, I applied for a job at Sterling Holdings using a fake identity. Luke Miller had a fabricated resume with just enough experience to qualify for an entry-level facilities technician position. The hiring manager barely glanced at my application before adding me to the roster. Sterling was expanding rapidly, and they needed bodies. My first day as Luke Miller, I cleaned the executive bathrooms and emptied the trash in Dad's office while he sat 3 feet away on a conference call. He never looked up. "Thanks," he muttered when I placed a fresh coffee on his desk, his eyes fixed on spreadsheets. I almost laughed at the irony. The first genuine gratitude I'd received from my father in years, and he had no idea it was me. Working maintenance taught me more about Sterling Holdings than any executive training program could have. I learned which managers treated staff with respect and which ones left messes for others to clean up. I discovered how information flowed through the building. Executive assistants who knew everything, security officers who saw everyone come and go, custodial staff who worked after hours and witnessed secrets. Most importantly, I gained access. My badge opened doors throughout the complex. No one questioned a facilities technician entering server rooms to check the temperature or visiting finance to fix the thermostat. I gathered information methodically, creating a shadow understanding of my father's empire. For 7 years, I lived this double life. Ethan Miller finished his degree, then pursued a master's, always vaguely figuring things out, according to family conversations. Luke Miller became the most reliable facilities technician at Sterling Holdings, the guy who could fix anything and never cause problems. Ashley, meanwhile, rose meteorically. After Stanford, she joined Sterling officially, becoming Dad's protege. Her office was 2 doors down from his, her name appearing on press releases about company initiatives. At family dinners, they discussed deals and developments, while I contributed occasional comments about books I'd read or places I'd traveled. What neither of them knew was that I was studying Sterling from the inside out, learning its weaknesses and strengths, understanding how every component functioned. I wasn't building a case against them, not initially. I was simply satisfying my own curiosity about how things actually worked versus how Dad claimed they did. Then I discovered the first discrepancy. It was small, an invoice approval for consulting services that didn't match any deliverable. The signature was Ashley's. I might have dismissed it as an oversight, except I found another the following week, and another. Over months, a pattern emerged. Ashley was systematically skimming from multiple departments, using her authority to approve payments to shell companies she controlled. The amounts were calculated precisely to avoid triggering automatic reviews, never large enough to raise immediate alarms, but consistent enough to accumulate significantly. I documented everything, but said nothing. This information was valuable, but only if used at the right moment. The year I turned 30, Dad was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. He was gone within months. The final weeks were a study in contrasts. Ashley took compassionate leave, making a show of organizing his care and consulting specialists. She'd sit by his hospital bed, holding his hand while photographers from company newsletters captured her devotion. I visited during off hours, sitting quietly in the dim light, sometimes reading aloud from books he'd never appreciated. During one such evening, he stirred from a morphine haze and really looked at me for the first time in years. "Ethan," he said, voice barely audible, "you're a disappointment." I nodded, expecting nothing else. But he continued, struggling for breath. "Maybe that's my failure, not yours." Before I could respond, he drifted back to sleep. He never mentioned it again, and I was left wondering if it had been the drugs talking or a moment of genuine reflection. At the reading of the will, Ashley sat with perfect posture in her designer black dress, rehearsed tears glistening. She'd always performed grief beautifully. I wore the only dark suit I owned and genuine numbness. To my daughter, Ashley, pride of my life, the lawyer read, "I leave 20% of Sterling Holdings and my summer home in Martha's Vineyard." Ashley's smile faltered slightly. 20% wasn't control. To my son, Ethan, who has always disappointed me but might yet surprise us all, I leave the remaining 80% of Sterling Holdings, the Midtown penthouse, and all remaining assets. With one condition. The room went silent. Ethan must prove his business acumen by increasing company value by 15% within 2 years, or everything transfers to Ashley. My sister's expression shifted from shock to calculated victory in seconds. Everyone knew I had no business experience. My father's final act had been setting me up to fail. What nobody realized was that I'd been working at Sterling under a different name for 7 years. Dad never recognized me in the facilities technician uniform or bothered to learn the names of the help. I knew more about our operations than anyone. That night, Ashley called me. "I'll buy your shares now for $5 million, she offered magnanimously. "Save yourself the humiliation." "I think I'll try my luck," I replied. "Don't be stupid, Ethan. You'll lose everything." She was already spending my inheritance in her mind. "I've never been good at taking the easy way out," I said. "Dad taught me that much, at least." "He was trying to spare you embarrassment," she insisted. "Everyone knows you don't have what it takes to run Sterling." I let the insult hang in the air, then said quietly, "Maybe, maybe not. I guess we'll find out." After hanging up, I poured myself a drink in Dad's, now my, penthouse. The place was a monument to his ego. 20-foot ceilings, Italian Carrara marble flooring, furniture selected by designers whose names doubled as status symbols. I hated every square inch of it. I spent that night formulating a plan, not just to retain my inheritance, but to expose the rot at Sterling's core, including my sister's systematic theft. 3 days later, Ashley accidentally ran into Vanity Fair style editor at Neiman Marcus, dropping hints about her new status as Sterling's heir apparent. Within weeks, she was featured in their Industry Heirs spread, photographed in designer clothes she couldn't yet afford. I called her from the penthouse. "I've been thinking about your offer," I said. "Let's make a deal." Her voice brightened, finally being sensible. "Not exactly. I'm willing to sign over temporary access to the penthouse and the company expense accounts while I figure things out. In exchange, you front as the face of Sterling." "Why would you do that?" Suspicion laced her voice. "Because I hate the spotlight, and you love it. Win-win." She agreed immediately, too quickly. What Ashley didn't know was that I'd already discovered the offshore accounts she'd been secretly diverting company funds into for years. The next morning, I moved into a modest apartment in Bushwick. Ashley took over the penthouse with indecent speed, replacing family photos with modern art and filling the closets with clothes that cost more than some people's annual salary. "You should see the faces at the board meetings when I walk in," she gloated over drinks that week. They never expected a woman to take control. I nodded, letting her believe her own fiction. "What exactly are you doing with your time?" she asked, barely concealing her contempt. "Soul searching," I replied with deliberate vagueness. "Trying to understand what I really want." She rolled her eyes. "Well, take your time. The company's in good hands." Ashley had no idea that every morning I still entered Sterling Holdings through the service entrance, wearing my facilities technician uniform. Luke Miller continued his diligent work while documenting every decision Ashley made, and she was making plenty. Within a month, she was hosting lavish parties at the penthouse, positioning herself as Midtown's newest socialite. Fashion magazines photographed her effortless style. Business journals quoted her vague statements about innovation and forward-thinking leadership. She appeared on morning shows discussing women breaking glass ceilings. All while I quietly worked 14-hour days at Sterling, still using my assumed name. Evening, Frank. I'd greet the nighttime security officer as I slipped into the building well after traditional business hours. "Working late again, Luke," he'd reply. No one ever questioned a facilities technician's presence or bothered to look at their face. I'd taken Dad's ruthless decisions comment to heart, just not in the way he'd imagined. Every night, I reviewed financial reports, monitored operations, and slowly, methodically tracked the money Ashley had been embezzling for years. She'd started small, expense account padding, fake vendor invoices, but her ambition had grown along with her taste for luxury. By the time Dad died, she'd siphoned nearly $2 million. I let her continue. In fact, I made it easier. "The board seems resistant to your ideas," I told her over brunch 3 months in. "Why not bring in your own people? Show them who's boss." She hired 5 of her friends, all equally unqualified, all equally hungry for status. I created a shell company that billed Sterling exorbitant consulting fees that flowed directly into accounts Ashley controlled. She bought a Porsche, then a McLaren. She renovated the Martha's Vineyard house with rare marble imported from Italy. She dated a succession of increasingly famous men, her face appearing on gossip sites weekly. Ethan, you should see the new yacht club, she told me during one of our monthly check-ins. Everyone who matters has a membership. Sounds expensive, I noted. That's the point. It separates the real players from the pretenders. Ashley had never noticed that during these conversations, I recorded everything. Every admission, every boast about her latest extravagance, all documented. Meanwhile, I was making subtle changes at Sterling. As Luke Miller, I'd identified inefficiencies throughout the organization. Now, I implemented solutions through anonymous suggestion boxes and carefully placed recommendations. Production costs decreased. Employee retention improved. Revenue began to climb incrementally but steadily. The facility's staff became my unofficial intelligence network. I'd created a bonus system, officially attributed to cost-saving initiatives, that rewarded them for reporting problems before they became disasters. They noticed everything: leaky pipes before they burst, equipment about to fail, security vulnerabilities. "Luke, you're a miracle worker," said Maria, the head of custodial services, after I'd fixed the industrial washing machine for the third time. "You should ask for a raise." I smiled. "I'm good where I am, but thanks." In truth, I was exactly where I needed to be, invisible to those at the top, indispensable to those at the bottom. 6 months after Dad's death, Sterling's value had increased by 7%. The board was cautiously optimistic but confused. Ashley took full credit during meetings I monitored remotely, claiming her strategic vision was transforming the company. After hours, I continued implementing improvements that no one but the facility's staff witnessed. Ashley's embezzlement accelerated proportionally with Sterling's success. The more money the company made, the more she diverted to her personal accounts. She became bolder, taking weekend trips to St. Bart's, commissioning a portrait of herself for the company lobby, buying rare wines by the case. One evening, I invited her to dinner at an exclusive Michelin-starred restaurant she'd been trying to get reservations at for months. "How did you manage this?" she asked, genuinely impressed as we were seated at the best table. "I know the owner," I said simply. What I didn't mention was that his daughter worked in Sterling's finance department, and I'd helped her expose a payroll issue that would have cost her job. During dinner, Ashley mentioned her latest profile in Forbes. "They're calling me the new face of real estate development," she preened. "The board is finally taking me seriously." I smiled. "Speaking of the board, they've called an emergency meeting tomorrow morning." Her champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. Why wasn't I informed? "You're being informed now," I said pleasantly. 9 a.m. sharp. "What's it about?" A note of anxiety crept into her voice. "I believe it's about the company's financial performance." "Nothing to worry about." She relaxed visibly. "I've been meaning to present my new expansion strategy anyway." Perfect timing. That night, I returned to my Bushwick apartment and removed Luke Miller's Sterling Holdings ID badge from my wallet. After 7 years, it was time for Luke to retire. The next morning, I arrived early, dressed in a tailored suit rather than my usual facilities coveralls. "Frank," the security officer did a double take. "Morning, Mr. Miller," he said, finally recognizing me. "Morning, Frank. How's your daughter enjoying Columbia University?" His eyes widened. "She loves it. Thank you again for the scholarship recommendation." I nodded and headed upstairs. The executive elevator felt strange after years of using service elevators and back staircases. The weight of what I was about to do settled on my shoulders, neither comfortable nor uncomfortable, simply necessary. The boardroom was already full when Ashley strode in at 9:07, dressed impeccably in a power suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. "Good morning, gentlemen," she began confidently. "I understand there are some concerns." "Take a seat, Ashley," I interrupted from the head of the table. She froze, confusion washing over her face. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "I work here," I replied calmly. "I always have." I nodded to the company's head of security, who distributed folders to everyone in the room. "What's happening?" Ashley demanded, her voice rising. "The board has called this meeting to address the systematic embezzlement of company funds over the past 5 years. The blood drained from her face. These folders contain detailed documentation of funds diverted through shell companies, falsified expense reports, and offshore accounts. The total currently stands at just over $7 million. This is ridiculous, she sputtered. I'm the face of Sterling Holdings. I run this company. Actually, said Robert Kim, our longest-serving board member, you own 20%. Your brother owns 80% and has been effectively running operations for years. Apparently, we just didn't know it. I opened my own folder. You'll also find documentation of the improvement in company valuation over the past 11 months. We're currently at a 22% increase, exceeding my father's requirement 7 months ahead of schedule. Ashley lunged for the folder in front of me. You set me up. No, I said quietly. I gave you exactly what you wanted, the spotlight, the acclaim, the lifestyle. You're the one who chose to steal from the company to maintain it. I deserved more than 20%, she hissed. Dad always preferred me. Dad preferred what you pretended to be. I corrected. I preferred understanding how things actually worked. The next hour was brutal. The evidence was irrefutable. Ashley's carefully constructed facade crumbled with each new document presented. By the end, she was sobbing, mascara tracking down her perfectly contoured cheeks. What happens now? She asked, voice barely audible. That depends on you, I said. Option 1. We press charges for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. You'll likely serve 3 to 5 years, minimum security. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Option 2. You resign from Sterling Holdings, effective immediately. Return the remaining stolen funds and sell your 20% stake to the company at fair market value. And if I refuse? I slid one final document across the table. This is a draft of the press release that will go out detailing your activities. I imagine those fashion magazines will find a new socialite to photograph. She stared at me with pure hatred. You planned this from the beginning. I learned from Dad, blood, sweat, and ruthless decisions. Remember? She stood abruptly, hands shaking. You don't know what it's like to be held to impossible standards your entire life. To never be good enough unless you're perfect. You got to be invisible. I had to be extraordinary. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. We all had the same father, Ashley. We just handled him differently. She stormed out, slamming the boardroom door hard enough to rattle the windows. Robert Kim cleared his throat. Mr. Miller, I must say this is unexpected. We had no idea you were so involved with the company's operations. That was intentional, I explained. I needed to understand Sterling from the ground up, not the top down. And this Luke Miller person? A necessary fiction. He submitted his resignation, effective immediately. I believe he's moving to Denver. I allowed myself a small smile. After the meeting, I found Frank at his security station. So, all this time he began. I was just doing my job, I finished. Like you. He shook his head in amazement. Your father never would have recognized you in that uniform. That was rather the point. That afternoon, I received a text from Ashley. I hope you're satisfied. You've destroyed my life. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I went to Dad's old office, my office now, and sat in his chair. The view of Midtown stretched before me, buildings rising like ambitions made concrete. I wondered if he'd ever really seen the city or just the deals it represented. My phone buzzed again. I'm keeping the Martha's Vineyard house. You can have everything else. This time, I replied, the house is yours. It always was. But the money you took belongs to Sterling. You have 48 hours to transfer it back. Or what? Came the immediate response. Or I'll make the evidence public. Your choice. 3 hours later, I received confirmation from our finance department. $6.2 million had been transferred from various offshore accounts back to Sterling. Not the full amount, but close enough. I texted Ashley, still missing about $800K. That's all that's left, she responded. I spent the rest. I believed her. Ashley's lifestyle had been aggressively extravagant. Between the Porsches, clothes, and countless parties, I was surprised she'd managed to save as much as she had. We'll consider the debt settled, I wrote back. Goodbye, Ashley. She didn't respond. The next week was a whirlwind of transition. I officially introduced myself to employees who'd known me only as Luke. Some were shocked, others nodded knowingly, as if they'd suspected all along. A few avoided my gaze, perhaps remembering how they'd treated the facility's technician who turned out to be the owner. I moved back into the penthouse, but immediately began renovations. The ostentatious fixtures Dad had installed were replaced with simpler, more functional designs. The Italian Carrara marble floors gave way to sustainable hardwood. The spaces became warmer, more welcoming. My first official act as CEO was to implement a company-wide minimum wage of $25 per hour, well above the industry standard. My second was to create a profit-sharing program for all employees, not just executives. The board questioned both decisions until I showed them the projections: improved retention, reduced training costs, increased productivity. This isn't charity, I explained. It's good business. 3 months later, I sat in the penthouse, now redecorated to my much simpler tastes, looking at the latest financial reports. Sterling Holdings was up 31% year-over-year. The door buzzer rang. "Package for you, Mr. Miller," said Frank from the lobby. It was a magazine, the latest issue of Forbes with my face on the cover. The Real Sterling: How Ethan Miller Quietly Transformed His Father's Legacy. I tossed it aside without reading it. My phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. "Congratulations on the cover. Enjoying your spotlight now?" I didn't respond. She'd taken the settlement and moved to Scottsdale, where her money would last longer away from midtown prices. Last I heard, she was dating a local real estate developer, already working her way into his company. Instead, I called Sarah Kim, Robert's daughter and our new head of community impact. "How's the affordable housing project in Astoria coming along?" I asked. "On schedule. The first families move in next month. And the scholarship program, 25 students starting this fall." This was the legacy I wanted to build, not one of ruthless decisions, but one of quiet impact. Dad never understood that my lack of ambition was actually a different kind of ambition altogether. That evening, I put on my facilities technician uniform and walked the Sterling building after hours, checking in with the custodial staff, the security team, the people who actually kept the company running. I knew all their names, their stories, their struggles and triumphs. Frank caught me adjusting a thermostat on the 11th floor. "Sir, you don't need to do that anymore," he said respectfully. "You could hire someone." I smiled. Some habits are hard to break. Besides, you learn a lot about a place when you're fixing what's broken. As I left the building that night, I passed the wall of company leadership portraits. Dad's stern face glared down from his gold-framed position of honor. Beside it now hung my own portrait, much simpler in its framing. And beneath both pictures, I'd added something new: a wall recognizing long-serving employees from every department, with Frank's 20-year service photo prominently featured. Ashley had wanted the Sterling name to open doors. I wanted it to build them for people who deserved a chance. Over the next year, Sterling Holdings continued to thrive under my leadership. We expanded into affordable housing developments, creating beautiful, sustainable communities in neighborhoods that had been neglected for decades. Our commercial properties adopted green technology and prioritized local businesses as tenants. The Sterling workforce grew more diverse, with promotion pathways established for employees from all departments. Dad would have hated most of it. His vision of success had been narrowly defined by profit margins and personal luxury. Mine encompassed something broader: sustainable growth, community impact, employee well-being. I thought about Ashley occasionally, wondering if she'd found what she was looking for in Scottsdale. I hadn't heard from her since that text about the magazine cover, which was probably for the best. Some rifts can't be repaired with apologies or time. Then, 6 months later, as Sterling's value continued to climb, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping about a fraud investigation into a development company in Scottsdale. Ashley's new boyfriend was quoted, claiming he'd been deceived by his business partner. I recognized the pattern immediately. Some people never change. They just find new stages for the same old performances. I picked up the phone and called our lawyer. "Send Ashley a message. Tell her I'm willing to help, but there are conditions." "What conditions, Mr. Miller?" he asked. "She has to come work at the company, not in management, not in finance, in maintenance, for 1 year. She'll never agree to that. Then she can face the consequences of her actions. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way." To my surprise, 2 weeks later, Ashley showed up at my office door. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. She looked tired, humbled. "You knew this would happen," she said, not bothering with hello. "I knew you hadn't changed," I corrected. "There's a difference." She sat down without being invited. "So, I become the help. That's your revenge." "It's not revenge. It's perspective. You've never seen how things actually work. You've never built anything. You've only taken. And you think scrubbing toilets will transform me." She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. I think understanding the people who make your life possible might. She laughed, a hollow sound. Dad would hate this. Dad never understood what really made Sterling successful. It wasn't his ruthlessness. It was the people who showed up every day despite it. Ashley started the following Monday, assigned to the facilities team that serviced our mid-level properties. She lasted 3 days before calling me. "This is inhumane," she snapped. "Do you know what they had me cleaning today?" "Life is messy," I replied. "Some of us just pay other people to deal with our messes. I'm not doing this for a year. It's degrading. Then I can't help you with your legal troubles." There was a long silence. "I don't understand you, Ethan. You have everything now. Why do you still dress like them? Why do you care?" "Because Dad raised you to believe success means having people beneath you. He raised me to believe I was beneath everyone. We were both wrong." After I hung up, I wasn't sure if she'd show up the next day, but she did. And the day after that. Slowly, something began to change. The calls complaining about the work stopped. Instead, she'd occasionally text observations or questions about operations. 3 months in, she proposed a more efficient cleaning schedule for one of the buildings that actually made sense. By month 5, she'd been promoted to team lead for her facilities group. Not because of her last name. Her supervisor had no idea she was related to me, but because she'd earned it. Maria, the head of custodial services I'd known for years, stopped by my office one afternoon. "That new girl, Ashley, she's something else," Maria said, clearly impressed. "Started out useless as a third shoe, but now works harder than most. Fixed the break room microwave herself yesterday." I hid my smile. People can surprise you. The anniversary of Dad's death came and went. I visited his grave alone, standing in silence before the ostentatious monument he'd specified in his will. "I did it my way," I finally said to the cold marble. "Not yours, not Ashley's, mine." On my way out, I was surprised to see Ashley entering the cemetery. We hadn't spoken outside of work matters in months. She nodded at me, but continued toward Dad's grave without stopping. That night, she called. "I get it now," she said without preamble. "What you were trying to show me. And what's that?" "That we're not better than anyone else. That Dad was wrong about what matters." Her voice had lost its brittle edge. "The woman I work with, Elena, she invited me to her daughter's quinceanera this weekend. Her daughter's dream is to be an architect." "That's nice," I said, uncertain where this was going. I thought maybe Sterling could use a scholarship program for architecture students from neighborhoods like Elena's. I found myself smiling. "I think that's an excellent idea. Why don't you work up a proposal?" "Really?" The surprise in her voice was genuine. "Really? This company could use more people who understand how to build things, not just own them." After we hung up, I looked out at the city skyline from the penthouse windows. Dad had built an empire through fear and ruthlessness. I was rebuilding it through something else entirely. The following week, Ashley delivered a detailed proposal for the scholarship program. It was thoughtful, comprehensive, and financially sound. As she presented it to the community impact team, I watched from the back of the room. This version of my sister, focused on creating opportunity rather than claiming status, was someone I'd never met before. "We could start with 5 scholarships," she was saying, targeting high-performing students from the neighborhoods where Sterling properties are located. Full tuition, books, living stipend, everything they need to focus on their education. Sarah Kim nodded approvingly. "I like it, but why stop at 5? With Sterling's resources, we could sponsor 20 students annually." Ashley's eyes widened. 20? That would be amazing. Draft a budget for both scenarios, I suggested, speaking up for the first time. "Let's see what's feasible." After the meeting, Ashley lingered. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for giving me this chance." I studied her, searching for signs of the old Ashley, the calculation, the performance. Instead, I saw only exhaustion and tentative hope. "Everyone deserves a second chance," I replied. "Even us." Ashley completed her year in maintenance and moved into a new role developing community initiatives. The architecture scholarship was just the first of many programs she created. She bought a modest condo in Bushwick, not far from where I'd lived during her socialite phase. We never became close. Too much history stood between us. But we found a kind of truce in the shared understanding that the Sterling name could mean something different than what our father had intended. At the company's annual party, as I watched Ashley chatting comfortably with staff from all departments, Frank appeared at my side. "Never thought I'd see the day," he remarked, nodding toward my sister. People can surprise you, I replied. He shook his head. Not that. I meant you, finally comfortable being Mr. Miller instead of just Luke from facilities. I realized he was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped hiding. Some roles we choose, I said. Others choose us. The trick is making them your own. As the evening wound down, Ashley approached me with 2 glasses of champagne. A toast, she offered, extending one to me. To what? To Dad, she said with a small smile. For being exactly the example we needed of what not to become. I clinked my glass against hers. And to us, for figuring that out before it was too late. We stood in silence, watching the company our father built and the people who now truly made it work. Not an empire of ruthless decisions, but a community of aligned purpose. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't what's left to you, but what you choose to build with it. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. A stack of architectural plans waited on my desk, the final designs for our newest affordable housing development in Harlem. As I reviewed them, I noticed thoughtful details I hadn't specified. Community gardens on the roof, a daycare center with floor-to-ceiling windows, public art installations integrated throughout the property. What do you think? Ashley asked from the doorway. These weren't in the original plans, I noted, pointing to the additions. I talked to the families currently living in the neighborhood. These were the things they wanted most. She hesitated. I hope that's okay. It's better than okay, I said honestly. It's exactly right. She smiled. Not the practiced, camera-ready smile I'd known all my life, but something genuine. I'm learning. Later that day, I called Frank to my office. I have a proposition for you, I began. Sir. His posture straightened automatically. Sterling needs a new head of security, someone who understands the building from every angle, who knows the staff, who can anticipate problems before they happen. His eyes widened. Are you offering me the job? With a salary commensurate with the position, yes. But I don't have a college degree. I've never managed a department. You've been managing security issues informally for 20 years. The degree is less important than the experience. He looked stunned. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. Take the weekend to think it over. After he left, I recalled something Dad had once told me during a rare moment of genuine conversation. A company is only as strong as the people who believe in it. He'd meant it as a justification for his ruthless management style, fear creating compliance. But there was another interpretation, one where belief stemmed from loyalty freely given, from purpose shared, from dignity recognized. That evening, as I walked through the building, I noticed Ashley in the community room, surrounded by architectural drawings. She was meeting with a group of high school students, our first cohort of scholarship prospects, helping them understand the basics of building design. The most important thing to remember, I overheard her saying, is that buildings aren't just structures. They're homes, workplaces, gathering spots. They shape how people live. So, when you design, think about the lives that will unfold inside. I stepped away without interrupting. Some lessons are better learned through doing than being told. Ashley was finally building something of value, not just for herself, but for others. As I headed toward the exit, I passed the facilities room. The door was open, and inside, the evening crew was gathering for their shift. Mr. Miller, Maria called out. Come meet our new team member. I stepped inside to find a young man in a too large uniform, looking nervous but determined. This is Mateo, Elena's son, Maria explained. The one who wants to be an architect. He's working evenings to help pay for school. I extended my hand. Welcome to Sterling, Mateo. Thank you, sir, he replied, his handshake firm despite his nervousness. Ms. Ashley said I should learn how buildings work from the inside out before I try to design them. I couldn't help but smile at the familiar philosophy. She's absolutely right. Later that night, alone in the penthouse, I pulled out the old facilities badge I'd kept as a reminder. Luke Miller had served his purpose, teaching me what Dad never could. That real power comes from understanding every level of a system, not just controlling it from above. My phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. The scholarship committee approved all 20 students. We start interviewing next week. I replied simply, well done. 2 years after Dad's death, Sterling Holdings had transformed from a symbol of wealth concentration to a model of community investment. Our developments won awards not just for design, but for innovation in affordable housing. Our scholarship program expanded to include trades, technology, and business. The Sterling name, once known primarily in luxury circles, now appeared on community centers, public parks, and education initiatives. We'd taken Dad's legacy and turned it inside out, revealing the potential that had always existed beneath the ruthless exterior. One rainy Tuesday, Ashley stopped by my office holding a worn cardboard box. "Found this while cleaning out the storage unit at the Martha's Vineyard house," she explained, setting it on my desk. Inside were old family photos. Mom holding infant twins, Dad teaching toddler Ashley to swim, teenage me reading beneath a tree, fragments of a family narrative I barely recognized. "I thought you might want these," Ashley said, oddly hesitant. "There's more history than just the Sterling Holdings story." I picked up a photo of the four of us, the only one I could remember where everyone was genuinely smiling, from some long-forgotten vacation before ambition consumed Dad, before illness took Mom, before expectations divided siblings. "Thank you," I said, surprised by the emotion in my voice. I'd forgotten what we looked like together. Ashley nodded, understanding without explanation. "We can't change the past." "No," I agreed. "But we're doing okay with the present." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Ashley, the architectural scholarship program. It's making a difference. Dad would never have understood its value, but Mom would have." She smiled slightly. "That's exactly what I thought when I proposed it. Sometimes healing happens in unexpected ways, through work that matters, through truth acknowledged, through foundations rebuilt rather than facades maintained." Frank accepted the head of security position. Maria moved into a newly created property operations management role. Mateo started his first year of architecture school while working weekends at Sterling. Life settled into a rhythm I'd never experienced before. Purposeful, connected, transparent. No more double identities, no more hidden observations, just the daily work of building something worthwhile. 6 months later, the lawyer who had read Dad's will contacted me. "Mr. Miller, there's something I think you should know about your father's will." "What about it?" I asked, concerned by his tone. "There was an earlier version, before the final one with the conditional inheritance. And in that version, he left everything to Ashley." "Everything." The lawyer paused. "He changed it just 2 weeks before he died." I sat with this information, turning it over in my mind. Did he say why? He mentioned something about seeing potential he'd overlooked, and something about maintenance reports that were unexpectedly thorough. A chill ran through me. Had Dad somehow discovered my secret identity in those final weeks? Had Luke Miller's attention to detail finally caught his attention? "Thank you for telling me," I said finally. That evening, I visited Dad's grave again, this time with new questions that would never be answered. Had he known? Had he glimpsed something authentic in me just before the end? Or was the conditional inheritance just another test, expecting me to fail? "It doesn't matter now," I told the silent headstone. "The company's stronger than it ever was under your leadership, different, but stronger." As I turned to leave, I noticed fresh flowers already placed at the base of the monument. Ashley had been there earlier. We were still circling the same center, just no longer colliding. Back at the penthouse, I opened a bottle of Dad's favorite scotch, an indulgence I rarely permitted myself, and raised a glass to the midtown skyline. "To ruthless decisions," I said to the empty room, "and to the strength it takes to make different ones." My phone lit up with a text from Ashley. "Coming to the scholarship ceremony tomorrow?" "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. The next day, 20 students accepted their Sterling architecture scholarships in the company's newly renovated community space. Parents cried. Board members applauded. Ashley gave a speech about building futures that made even Robert Kim discreetly wipe away a tear. I stood at the back, watching not just the ceremony, but the room itself. Facilities technicians who'd taken their lunch break to attend, security personnel positioned by the doors, executive assistants filming on their phones to share with absent colleagues. The invisible support structure that made everything else possible, now visible and celebrated. After the ceremony, Mateo's mother, Elena, approached me. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've cleaned Sterling buildings for 15 years. Never thought my son would be designing them someday." "He earned it," I assured her. "We just provided the opportunity." "No," she corrected gently. "You changed what was possible." "That's different." As the crowd dispersed, I found Ashley standing by the windows, watching the students take photos with their families. Remember when Dad used to say there are winners and losers in this world? She asked without turning. Every day at dinner, I confirmed. I think he was wrong, she said simply. There are builders and takers. We get to choose which will be. I nodded, the truth of it settling into place. Which is why I let you face the consequences of your choices. You needed to see both sides clearly. She was quiet for a moment. I hated you for that, for the humiliation, for making me start over from nothing. I know. But now I think it's the only thing that could have saved me from becoming exactly like him. She finally turned to face me. So, thank you, I guess, for being ruthless in the right way. I thought of Dad changing his will in those final weeks, perhaps seeing something in me he'd missed all along. Maybe the real legacy he'd left wasn't sterling holdings, but the object lesson of his life. What to embrace, what to discard. We're still Millers, I said. Just different kinds than he imagined. Ashley smiled at that. Maybe that's the real inheritance, the freedom to rebuild. Outside, rain began to fall on the city our father had tried to conquer and that we were now trying to serve. Buildings disappear eventually. Fortunes change hands. Names fade from memory. But the impact of choices, to take or to build, to hoard or to share, to destroy or to repair, ripples outward long after the decision-makers are gone. I thought about the employee recognition wall, now expanded to include facilities staff, security personnel, administrative teams, the invisible made visible, the essential acknowledged. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen not through destruction, but through quiet, persistent reconstruction, day by day, choice by choice, rebuilding what was broken into something stronger than before. Dad had taught us about power, but we had taught ourselves about purpose.